Dear Father Simon and the angelic axis of absolution.
Yes, that's
nice.
us.
Yes,
I've
very
had that
good.
before. My confession only dates back a few months to one uncharacteristically warm and humid evening where I found myself wide awake and sweating in bed. Now, normally I would sleep with the window open in this situation, but on this particular evening I was prevented from doing so due to some very loud and very terrible music going thump, thump, thump. I live in a ground floor apartment in a normally quiet and delightfully boring block where all the residents are polite and never talk to each other. It's wonderful. However, over the past year, we've started to see different faces appear regularly as several of the apartments are being let on that website where you can rent out your property for short periods. Well, you know, and why not? I don't really mind, Father Simon. I'm a fairly easygoing chap. People need to make money after all. It's a slight shame that the hosts don't stay there too to keep some kind of order, but what can you do? Now, I've done my fair share of partying and making noise, and I'm given at least a few days' notice. If I'm given a few days' notice, I'm happy to still do so, provided it's on a weekend. These days I have to mentally prepare. I'm over 35, I'm an accountant, I eat hummus, and I also own hiking poles. You must... Which is it? Is it the hummus or the hiking poles that indicates your middle age? I don't know. You most certainly wouldn't find me up partying at 1:30 on a Friday morning with a bank manager coming in a few hours. So to find myself lying awake at this very time while sweating profusely is less than ideal. The music was coming from the apartment on the second floor directly above me. Under normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't be able to hear them, but the guests have the balcony doors open and are continuing the party out there. With my window closed, it's loud. With my window open, it feels like I'm at a gig. Initially, I took the usual approach of tutting disapprovingly and getting flustered, whilst hoping someone else would say something. After a few minutes, I concluded that this was not working and perhaps a different approach was needed. So I got up, put on some clothes and headed upstairs to have a quiet word. After knocking on the door several times, each one a little louder than the last, it was finally answered. What stood before me was a young man of around 20 who looked like a police e-fit, but with none of the charm. What do you want? He said.
Oh, it's him.
Well, it has to be him, doesn't it? Well, I say, you see, I was wondering, could you perhaps turn the music down a little? Or maybe close the balcony doors, please? But it's awfully loud for the rest of us. And most of us have work tomorrow, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Turning his head to look back into the apartment, he shouted, "Here, guys, it's the fun police," before looking back at me and saying, "Whatever you say, officer." Grinning, he then slammed the door in my face. For a few seconds, I stood there in shock. That fun police line was brilliant, and I hated him for it. Then I hated myself for getting this old. I was quickly brought back to my senses, however, as I heard the music volume being turned up. I was quickly brought back to my senses. Now, Simon, as I said, I'm a fairly easygoing chap, but I have my limits. I'd like to think that if my life was a movie, the action music would kick in about now as we head into a montage. I calmly went back down the 2 flights of stairs to my apartment and opened my window to allow the cool breeze to start its work. I then armed myself with various screwdrivers, like I was Rambo about to do some DIY. Heading back out, instead of going up this time, I headed down to the basement car park. After a short walk, I came to a door. With a key code lock, I punched in the combination and I opened it. I used a screwdriver to remove the back plate of the lock and changed the combination to one of my own before closing the lock back up again. I stepped inside the room and grinned mischievously as I eyed a wall full of electricity meters and master trip switches for all the apartments in the block. Cue a side look and wink to camera, says Captain Cheese Lover. I walked up to the main trip switch for the noisy apartment, hesitated briefly to savour the feeling of the switch beneath my fingers, and with a quick flick, shut off all their power. Absolutely all of it. No more loud music for them. Bye. No more hot water for your showers that you're sharing with everybody. Lights off, kids. It's time for bed. School tomorrow. Then adds in brackets, "Don't worry, Sister Bobby, we have a single fire alarm system for the whole block with its own power supply, not individual smoke alarms, so no one was in danger." Close brackets. He's thought of everything. I turned around and sauntered back out of the door, letting it slam behind me. I had correctly guessed that I could be up one flight of stairs and back in my apartment before the noisy people a whole 2 floors above could figure out what had happened. Plus, their brains were a bit hazy. Lying back on my bed, I basked in the glorious moment. Above me, I could hear some muffled voices and the odd choice expletive drifting away on the wind. I couldn't help but smile as I imagined them trying to call their host to sort the problem out at such a late hour. Him telling them the code in the electric cupboard and then the code not working. It was so juicy I could taste it. And it wasn't long before I drifted off into a self-satisfied slumber. Before I knew it, 6:30 rolled around, and even though I was a little tired, I still had a spring in my step. I was out of my apartment by 7:15, quickly went back downstairs to check the lock combo, and everything else was fine. It was, as it turned out, the perfect crime. However, Father Simon, I would like to beg your forgiveness, not from the chap who slammed the door in my face, nor the other noisy people in the apartment, nor do I seek forgiveness from the host, who should select guests with better feedback and explain the rules of the lease to anyone staying there. No audible sound outside the apartment after 10. Thank you very much, you scoundrels. No, Father Simon, I only seek forgiveness from all my fellow 35-plus-year-old peers for besmirching our good name with accusations of being a little bit fun police at times. I still like to have fun, just not on a school night. Okay, everybody, says Captain Cheeselover. Well, we all have our limits, and Captain Cheeselover clearly was pushed beyond his. Sister Bobby Pryor.
We do have our limits, and we all have reasonable limits. I like Captain Cheeselover because he seems reasonable. You know, he's aware that people like to have fun, but I can also see that actually he's completely worn out, and I imagine the rest of the block is too. Also, you went up and said politely, could you turn it down?
Yes.
They could have said, actually, yeah, let's come on, guys, other people have got to go to work tomorrow. You've got to turn it down. What they did is turn it up to say, stuff you. So, you know what? Captain Cheeselover.
Surprised.
You get my absolute forgiveness.
The thing is,
Well
we'd all like to be Captain Cheese. We'd all like to have the answer to that really annoying racket in our hands, and it just turned out that he did.
Yes, and, you know, we all have our limits, and I have thoroughly unreasonable limits. I will not tolerate any noise whatsoever after the hours of darkness have descended. If you do more than whisper, I am knocking on your door.
Well, at 5 o'clock in the evening.
At 5 o'clock in the evening, I am knocking on your door. Can you keep it down? Some of us are trying to watch the telly, and I'm being distracted by you breathing too noisily. So I'm definitely going to forgive, because I think this is one of the deadly sins that if they'd come up with the list, we'd have put this on instead of perhaps gluttony or lust. We'd have put on. We'd get rid of them, and let's have not having any loud music. So definitely.